starts in one of the most amazing places imaginable, the human eye. So let's just jump right in with a question. What if something as small as a pinprick, these little tiny dots on the surface of your eye, could tell a doctor exactly what's going on with you? I know, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but believe it or not, this is a real diagnostic tool that gets used every single day. So what is this clue we're talking about? Our whole investigation really centers on this one very specific piece of evidence that can show up on the surface of the eye. So let's put a name to this thing. Okay, they're called punctative epithelial erosions, or P for short. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but it's actually pretty simple. As the definition says, they're just tiny defects on your cornea. That's the clear dome at the front of your eye. A good way to think of them is like microscopic potholes. They're an early warning sign that something is stressing out the front of your eye. And this isn't just some neat idea. This is straight from the medical textbooks. This slide right here, it's like a peek behind the curtain at the exact source material that ophthalmologists and optometrists use. You can see how they learn to connect the location of these tiny dots to a whole bunch of different potential causes. And that brings us to the really cool part of this whole explainer. See, finding these tiny dots is one thing, but figuring out what they mean, well, that requires us to think of the cornea not just as a window, but as a kind of diagnostic map. And this, right here, is the absolute key. For a trained eye doctor, the secret isn't just noticing that these little erosions are there. No, the real mystery is solved by figuring out where on the cornea they are. Their position, their location, is everything. So let's learn how to read this map, shall we? Because depending on where these clues pop up, they could be pointing to completely different problems. Let's start with our first zone and see how this all works. We're going to start right in the middle, smack in the bullseye of your cornea. This is the area directly in front of your pupil, and it's absolutely the most critical part for giving you that nice, clear vision. So, if an eye doctor sees a little cluster of these dots right here in the center, the first thing they're probably going to think of is something super common. The table points right to it: prolonged contact lens wear. It's a classic sign that, hey, maybe you've been wearing your lenses a little too long, or maybe even fell asleep in them. Okay, next up on our map, we've got what's called the interpalpebral zone. That's just a fancy term for the part of your cornea that's exposed to the air between your eyelids when your eyes are open. Basically, it's the part that's always facing the world. And because this area is so exposed, it's open to a totally different set of problems. Clues here often point to things like dry eye, that feeling you get after staring at a computer screen for hours. It can also be a sign of UV damage from the sun, which can lead to a condition that's basically like a sunburn on your eye. Ouch. All right, let's move down the map to the inferior zone. Put simply, this is the lower third of your cornea. And clues that show up down here, they tell a completely different story. A pattern in this lower section points to a whole new lineup of suspects. It could be something called chronic blepharitis, which is just inflammation of your eyelids. It might even be a bad reaction to certain eye drops, what doctors call toxicity. Or it could be something as simple as aberrant eyelashes. Yep, eyelashes that are growing the wrong way and rubbing against your eye. And the map gets even more detailed. A pattern on the superior or upper part can point to something called floppy eyelid syndrome. And if the dots are just scattered all over the place in what's called a diffuse pattern, that might suggest a viral infection like pink eye. See, every single location tells its own story. So let's pull all of this together. We've seen that these tiny little dots are way more than just random spots. They're signals, and their location, that's the key that unlocks the entire message. This is the big takeaway, and it's stated perfectly right here in the source material. The location of the lesions may give an indication of etiology. Now, etiology is just the fancy medical word for the root cause of a problem. In other words, where the clue is tells you what the problem is. Simple as that. So why does any of this matter to you? Well, it means that your eye doctor isn't just guessing. They're literally reading a map that your own body has created for them. It lets them quickly narrow down the possibilities, figuring out if it's a simple fix, like you're wearing your contacts too long, or if it's something more complex. It's just a fascinating example of how our bodies are constantly talking to us, sending these specific signals about what's going on inside. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. The eye has its own secret diagnostic map. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden maps is your body using to send you signals, just waiting for someone to learn how to read them? It's funny to think about the secrets our bodies might be keeping. Little clues